This is Dr. David Shine, and welcome to Business Law 101. We talked about eminent domain in Chapter 1 on Tuesday. Remember, we talked about the Kelo case where they were contesting the public taking private land that would ultimately benefit another private company. The Supreme Court, to my opinion, to my surprise, rendered an opinion saying that as long as there was an alleged public purpose, even if the land that was taken ended up in private hands, as long as it serves some kind of vague public purpose, it was okay. So that's a very criticized decision, the Kelo decision. Due process is something that we hear a lot about when you're watching episodes of Law and Order and those shows. You're going to hear them talk about due process, say, well, we didn't get our due process. And sometimes you'll hear about it in different settings. And this is procedural in nature. Procedural due process just means, for instance, if you get a traffic ticket, that you have a right to know about the traffic ticket. Here in Texas, you can have a jury trial over a traffic ticket and so forth. You can't get surprised. Like if you have a radar gun that sees your car go past and it says, oh my goodness, that person's going 70 in a 55 mile an hour area, and they can't just go into court and haul you into court. They have to send you a notice and say, hey, we saw you speeding on Tuesday night, January 6th. We want you to be aware of the fact that you're in trouble. You have to appear in court and explain yourself and so forth. You're entitled to that due process. And like I said, here in Texas, generally speaking, people can get a jury trial on almost everything, including traffic violations of some kind. Substantive due process deals with the actual effect of the law, the actual internal workings of the law. And for instance, in terms of limiting what people can do. For instance, there are certain things that cannot be sold. So I was down visiting in Belize over Christmas, and in Belize, you cannot take crocodile. Now, think about it. Here in Texas, people can harvest alligators. People in Louisiana can harvest alligators. In Belize, the crocodiles are protected, and you cannot take and that's substantive. If you are accused of taking a crocodile, that's going to be due process and procedural. But so you can see how the two pieces, substantive and procedural, fit together. The 14th Amendment is very important. It applies due process and equal protection to state action. And remember, state action has to come under the strict scrutiny sense, and that's one of the three balancing tests. Intermediate scrutiny, legislation is substantially related. Rational basis, legislation is reasonably related to legitimate purpose of government. Now, Dr. Shine's editorial comment here is an awful lot of stuff is allowed to come under these bases that I think shows a progressive taking of our liberties by the courts. The courts keep going and going, and instead of having strict scrutiny, as we're showing here, they're doing this intermediate or rational basis test, which means that in a lot of cases, certain protections that we have are going away, and it's a little bit of a concern. Now, one of the things that's interesting is privacy is not protected in the Constitution. However, famously, a famous jurist said, I don't see that there's any way avoiding a right to privacy, that if you have a right to free speech, you have a right to freedom of religion, clearly a right to privacy is included in this halo. They call it penumbra, the halo around the Constitution, that it's reasonable to expect that the federal government will protect your privacy.